and we will do some. We are doing some of that. The politics become important. The process is as important as the document. And there were some flaws in the process then, and I will be honest with you, I was a part of the process, and I would do some things differently. The other thing, there were some people in the field who were positive about that report until Ed Rothstein in the New York Times just ripped it to shreds.
And now there was a lot of heat there hadn't been before.
And it was a big piece on Sunday, the dumbing down of America's orchestras. And to be honest with you, some people moved to the other side of the thing, which is not uncommon.
Which is to say, and again, I'm not saying this is a horrible thing, a mistake that the League made. I don't think you all had been quite in the position of articulating recommendations like that so publicly, that there hadn't been enough discussion in advance about what to do if there was a reaction like Ed Rothstein's in the Times.
Or, Greg, enough discussion in advance about how to prevent such a reaction by sitting down with the writers ahead of time and talking it through and answering questions.
In other words, what does it mean to publish a report like this, and how do we have to act to get the most out of it?
Which is why the League's current strategic planning process, which sets out all of the things that you have called bold, is a process that went on for 2 years. Americanizing the American orchestra, which, by the way, before I came to the League, was officially buried by the League. If you came into this office and asked for it, you were told it didn't exist anymore and we didn't reprint it. Wasn't true, and I now tell people, yeah, we'll give it to you. We got it. But that process really started after a League conference and after the month after it when people are recovering, roughly end of July, beginning of August, to be published the following conference in June. Yes. In a bound volume, printed, and everything else. And so 10 months, actually really 8 or 9, whereas our planning process took 2 years and was published then in a draft form because we thought it through carefully and we went about building a consensus. And where we met with opposition, we did one of two things. We either modified our position or we spent time until we won people over to that point of view. The process, and having lived, by the way, through Americanizing, taught me a lot about how to do what we want to do and not have it rejected.
I'll bet it did, and you have done exactly the segue I wanted to do, which is to contrast that experience with the current strategic planning experience, because there are things in the strategic plan that are bold. There are statements about difficulties that orchestras have had that you might not expect the organization that also has to lobby in Washington for support of orchestras to be making. I really admire that. And the difference in the process, the way you've proceeded this time to make sure that when the thing comes out, the majority of people in the orchestra world are going to say, yes, we stand behind this. We have been consulted. It does, to some extent, represent what we think.
We had, over 2 years, all kinds of meeting groups of administrators. I mean, first of all, we did a survey of musicians, board members, volunteers, and musicians. We had meetings, and we had them in different parts of the country with managers from different group sizes, board members from different group sizes. We sat down, and meetings were, often all-day retreats facilitated. When we would run into an issue, when we would run into a problem, say resistance, not sure the League should be saying this about orchestras, we might bring in funding sources who would say to that group of people, you know what, all of us feel this about orchestras. It's not, the League isn't revealing something here, and in fact, many of the national foundations would welcome the field being honest about its issues. Well, that helped to build a consensus. There also were a couple of ideas that we had in early discussion stages that for the time being we've taken off, put them on the back burner because now isn't the time. Let's build a consensus for what we want to do. But by having these thorough discussions, incorporating people, actually to the point where one group of large orchestra managers finally said to us about 6 months before we released it, It's time you stopped asking for our input and just get on with it.
Just come out with the
And
damn thing.
we're saying we want to be sure when we do there are no explosions. So it was a very careful and very thorough process. I don't remember the number. At one point, I actually knew the number, but there were probably over 1,000 people involved in discussions and meetings about this process, from the smallest to the biggest, from youth orchestras, from funders. We had publishers, we had artist managers, we had journalists. I mean, we tried to bring in a broad range of people who interact with orchestras as well as people from inside the field, and really listen to them.
And you really had to make some statement. This is a case, I think, when the League had to step up to the plate and take on the difficult task of representing orchestras, because the thing you always encounter in the press and elsewhere when orchestras are talked about is that the field is troubled, that the field has an aging audience, it has declining ticket sales, and regardless of whether that's true or to what extent it's true, it is the perception.
Absolutely.
So the League cannot not address that. You must address that.
Right.
And you've done it.
Well, we've begun to do it.
You've begun to do it.
I mean, it's one of the principal reasons for establishing this R&D department, which, I mean, some of that came out of these discussions. People said, we need more and better data.
As of course you do. But even, a year ago, when Lowell Noteboom, your terrific board chairman, gave an address at the conference, he outlined some stuff, which I gather is part of the thinking in the strategic plan, that was not the kind of, if I can put it this way, boosterism that you normally hear from a service organization.
Yep.
It was really striking to hear. Of course, knowing Lowell, what else could it have been? And I know it's also your policy to be talking in this way. But it was really a breath of fresh air.
Oh, yeah.
And
we got a little pushback from, you run the risk, if you have the kind of process I described to you, you do run the risk of coming out with pablum, of coming out with something that offends nobody. We didn't take that point of view. We took the point of view that it's okay to offend all of the stakeholders a little bit. If most of them said, well, we agree with 75 or 80% of it, and we'll live with the other 20, that's good. Because if everybody says, oh, it's great, I have no problem with it, then you're not pushing at all. And we got some pushback about, particularly, candidly, about Lowell's part of it, in which he was kind of blunt about some of the problems, but we didn't get enormous pushback, and we didn't get enormous resistance. And we also had a lot of people, even in the field, as well as people like you, saying it's about time that the field said it and admitted that it was starting to deal with it. So that's, I go back to what I said about the difference between this process and Americanizing. That's the step that was missing in Americanizing. I mean, you're absolutely right. You go back and read that now. Frankly, it looks like a blueprint for a strategic plan, is what it looks like. But if I've learned nothing in 45 years of managing things, one thing I've learned is that process is as important as result. Process gets you result.
So I guess, Henry, you get the Herding Cats Award for the year 2007. Is the strategic plan done yet? Forgive me for not knowing this. I ought to.
The answer is not quite, but it will be by the conference. What was unveiled at the conference last year, and then a little bit later version. Last year, what we said is, here's all the things we intend to do. What it did, and I wouldn't let it be called a strategic plan. I had it called strategic direction. It was actually a debate I had with Lowell, in which in the end he said, yeah, you're right. I said, strategic plan to me includes, and here's how we're going to do it. That part hadn't been done. That we have been working on. We actually presented a preview of it to our board in late April, and they have approved it, and it will come out at the conference. It is just about done.
And then will it be available for anybody to download?
Yes.
Terrific.
Well, actually have it we're going to present an executive summary of it, I think, at the conference, and I think a full version of it in some form.
Yeah, that would seem, well.
I don't know whether to download or